All right, we'll call today's Housing, Urban Development and Zoning Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Vice Chair Saunier. Alderman Browning.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. Chair Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderman Cone. Vice Chair Saunier. Alderman Aldridge. We have 3 present.
Thank you. With that, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes. We have 3. Oh, you do. Okay. Is anyone online?
No, we have no one online.
Okay. We'll come back to the minutes to approve once we hopefully get a quorum. I'll send some text out, so we'll skip down. Oh, here we go. Perfect timing, Vice Chair Saunier. I guess settled. Okay. With that, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes from Tuesday, September 24th, 2020. Oh, here's Alderman Cone.
I move that we approve the minutes from Tuesday, September 24th, 2024.
Okay, it was moved by Alderman Browning, second by Alderman Cone, that we approve the minutes from Tuesday, September 2024. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Saunier.
Aye.
Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. Chair Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. We have 5 aye votes.
All right, that we've approved the minutes. Now we'll move down without any board bills for review or resolutions for review down to committee discussions. Discussion item number 1, the annual compliance report. Representatives from the St. Louis Development Corporation, SLDC, will discuss their compliance with City Code 3.160. When you come up, if you can please introduce yourself so that the clerk can make sure she properly notes your names. Thank you.
Okay, now it's okay. Madeline Swanstrom, I'm the Incentive Compliance Manager at St. Louis Development Corporation. Okay, good morning. I'm here to report on our compliance with St. Louis City Code Chapter 3.10. Next slide, please. Or is there a clicker? Oh, okay, great. So yes, we are required by the chapter to prepare this annual compliance report addressed to the mayor and the Board of Aldermen and presented at a public meeting, the HUD's committee meeting, before the end of the fiscal year. This is the first time that we are presenting a report such as this. And it was ready before the end of the fiscal year, but here we are a few months later to present it to you all. So there are 3 ordinances that comprise the chapter. I'm sure you are all here familiar with. Including 71620, which was passed in 2023, 71833, which was passed in this year, 2024, and 71809, which was passed in 2024, again this year. And I will be going through different provisions of the chapter and these ordinances and detailing our compliance, and then I'll also go into some summary statistics of the developments that we've passed as a city since the first ordinance was passed, as well as for the past 6 years. So that's at the end. So the first part of the chapter that I will discuss is the Sunshine Law and provision to live stream meetings. So we do live stream all of our St. Louis Development Corporation run development boards and meetings, and we make the minutes public. And the public may always make Sunshine Law requests through our website to access our publicly available records. Next slide, please. We are also required to, at least once per calendar year, hold a publicly accessible training seminar that covers the requirements and policies that govern our redevelopment agreements. So that would be state statute as well as city ordinances and city code that governs our redevelopment agreements. So we've posted it on our website on May 23rd of this year, and the public can access it on our website here. Next slide, please. We are also required to provide the board with a development proposal report when board bills are filed requesting tax incentives. So this includes information about the applicant, also information about the site itself, the approvals needed to implement the project, the recommendation from SLDC regarding the incentive, summary of attempts to gather public input if necessary. That's for projects over $10 million. A response from St. Louis Public Schools if they approve or oppose the project, information about site selection for business retention, expansion, and attraction projects, community benefit scorecard and an economic analysis, support letters, any proposed deviation from a standard development agreement, and labor contracts. So we now have a template for these development proposal reports, which you all are very familiar with here on the board. And we also vet developers and include information about their relevant past projects, as well as any abatement that has occurred on the site previously. The community benefit scorecard is an objective tool that we use that gives a score to each project to ensure that these projects meet objectives that were stated by the community, including prioritizing neglected geographic areas, transit access, historic preservation, and the amount of investment as well. We also include a financial analysis, which projects the developer's returns or cap rates with or without the requested incentive. And that's the most rigorous but-for test that we have available. Based on this analysis and expected returns for real estate projects in the immediate area, we recommend the appropriate incentive. Next slide, please. So the chapter also requires that for projects over $10 million, they are required to engage the community and gain some community support and gain that proof of local support before we present it to the Board of Aldermen. Most projects in this range have not faced any major barriers, but one that did is Fanning School, which you all are probably familiar with. The community support was non-conclusive due to a breakaway neighborhood group that opposed the project. This is not the only reason that the project is stalled. Actually, they also were not awarded LIHTC in the last round, but we are hopeful that the school will be redeveloped in the future, but right now the pathway to redevelopment is somewhat uncertain. So then we also have a requirement to contact St. Louis Public Schools and inform the school system about projects that are over $1 million and let them take a stance about whether or not they oppose or support the project. We were not able to get the right contact until January 18th, 2024, after many attempts to reach out to SLPS. However, after January 18th, we did find the right contact. They have not taken a stance either way and have not opposed any of the projects that we have brought before them so far. Next slide, please. So there are also things that we had to add to our development agreements as a result of the chapter, including default or forfeiture of future tax incentives in the event of failure to fulfill community benefit commitments, failure to comply with the requirements of ordinances 60275, 69427, 7067, and 71094, as may be amended or supplemented, and those are pertaining to first source hiring, minority-owned and women-owned business participation, workforce development, and prevailing wage compliance. Following project completion, they also need to maintain the property up to code, and they will be at risk of default if they do not do that. They have a cure period of 30 days. And then also, they need to comply with the accessibility requirements of 24 CFR Section 8.22, which is an accessibility federal legislation. And SLDC has added all of these provisions to our standard development agreement template. And I think the biggest change, of course, was the requirement to fulfill their community benefit commitments. So anything they present to the Board of Aldermen and it's passed as counting towards their community benefit scorecard, they must follow through on. For example, if there's affordable housing requirements. They need to keep the rents at those levels. We get annual reports from them every year. That's part of my position that I collect those. And so if they have to follow their community benefit commitments, we check those against their community benefits every year. Next slide, please. We also are required to include clawbacks for any misleading representations or material changes, such as construction costs significantly below the projected construction costs that they gave us in the application, and a revenue protection policy indexing the tax abatement base and payments in lieu of taxes to ensure that real revenue does not fall as a result of tax abatements. So Chapter 3.160 also requires that developers report verified project construction costs, total development costs, and sources of funding for the project. They need to comply, of course, with all aspects of the redevelopment agreement. We have included these clawbacks for misleading representations. Developers also have to submit project construction costs, total development costs, and sources of funding in an affidavit when construction is complete. We also have now included for new projects, for new developments and new redevelopment agreements, a base escalator based on, now this is actually inaccurate in this presentation, I just changed it, it's in your printout. It's actually based on the CPI as published by the State Tax Commission of Missouri between 2003 and 2022. This was data that was provided with the assessor. We also looked at average real estate inflation, but decided to go with the CPI from the state instead. So we will provide the updated PowerPoint with the right information on how we got to that metric. Then, of course, as past this year, we must notify a number of labor organizations or any other labor organization that wants to be notified about upcoming developments. And we need to include copies or documentation of any valid bargaining agreements or any other contracts between the developer or unions that wish to represent workers at the future development. And we've included this step in our incentive flow chart. And we are working on just getting the contact information for all of these unions, and we'll definitely reach out to them before we present to the Feds Committee. Next slide, please. And then tax accountability for developers, or TADA. We have Alderwoman Saunier today who sponsored this ordinance. And so, as you know, all projects are required to provide evidence of good standing to the collector of revenue and be cleared by the collector of revenue before they seek tax incentives. And throughout the duration of the incentive, they also need to remain up to date on their water and refuse bills and their tax bills, or they'll be at risk of defaulting on the incentive. So we are notifying developers of this new process and referring them to the collector of revenue who can clear them on their TDA forms. And we're also adding these steps to our updated flow chart so that they are aware. Next slide, please. Just a bit of an update since we first prepared this report. We began submitting the TDA forms to the collector of revenue on June 5th, 2024. And we are developing a process still to inform labor organizations of upcoming developments. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go, as requested by the President of the Board of Aldermen, through the projects that have been passed or approved by the Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority Board since February 2023, when the first ordinance 71620 was passed that comprises this chapter. So we had 3 that were under $1 million, did not require notifying the schools or engaging the community. 3417 Louisiana Avenue, renovation family home. And the LCRA recommended an abatement period of 10 years at 75%. The Board of Aldermen approved the Chapter 99 redevelopment plan effective November 26, 2023. We also had 4132 South Compton Avenue, renovation of a 2-family home in Dutchtown. LCRA recommended an abatement period of 10 years at 95%, which was passed by the Board of Aldermen effective January 18th, 2024. Then we had 1902 to 1904 Dodier Street, which was the rehab of a 4-family in Old North. And LCRA recommended an abatement period of 10 years at 95%, which was then passed by the board effective April 13th this year. Next slide, please. We also had a few projects that were over $1 million but under $10 million. So these did require notifying SLPS, but did not require engaging the community or gaining community support. So first we have 4923 to 4949 Dr. Martin Luther King Drive, the proposed Sweetie Pies restaurant in the MLK corridor. We actually did not, we were not able to notify SLPS, so that's not accurate. I'll update the slide. But it was passed by the Board of Aldermen on October 25th, 2023, effective October 25th, 2023. We also had 3041 Locust, a mixed-use property with 8 apartments above 5,800 square feet of ground floor commercial space. The owner is also the primary occupant, Falkbuilt St. Louis, a leader in digital component interior construction. LCRA recommended an abatement period of 10 years at 75%, which was then passed by the Board of Aldermen effective January 18th of this year. And then 1105-207 Olive Street, I believe this has not yet been approved by the Board of Aldermen, but it was approved by LCRA earlier this year. And SLPS was notified for this, but does not oppose the project. It's a rehabilitation of a downtown building to be turned into an adult care facility. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have projects of over $10 million, 2 of which were stalled. We have 3417 Grace Avenue or Fanning School, and I already went into why that project has stalled and is no longer seeking abatement. 2500 Ohio Avenue is, they are no longer seeking abatement as well, but it was approved by LCRA, but did not go before the Board of Aldermen. And then we had Marquette Homes, which I'm sure you all will remember. It was a scattered site redevelopment providing 60 units of affordable housing in Gravois Park. And it received, of course, robust community support. And LCRA recommended an abatement period of 10 years at 90%, followed by 5 years at 50%. Board of Aldermen approved this redevelopment plan effective September 29th, 2023. Next slide, please. And then for the rest of the projects that were over $10 million, both by Midas, 400 South 14th Street, the Edison Building Hotel and Condominiums, and they did receive support from the community, and SLPS was notified but did not oppose the project. And LCRA recommended an abatement period of 10 years at 75%, which was then passed by the Board of Aldermen effective February 23rd, 2024, this year. And finally, we have 2601 Market. This was the construction of 2 new hotels, Kimpton and Staybridge Suites at Jefferson and Market. It received community support, and SLPS did not oppose the project. We were able to send that to them as well. LCRA recommended an abatement period of 10 years at 75%, which was then passed by the Board of Aldermen effective June 1st of this year. Next slide, please. So then we also had a couple of site redevelopment plans that were not attached to an actual one project. The blighting study for the St. Louis Place and Jeff Vanderloo neighborhoods was passed by the board effective April 5th, 2024. And 4800 Goodfellow was passed by LCRA. It has not gone before the Board of Aldermen yet. It is the St. Louis Army Ammunition Plant or SLAP site. Neither of these required community or SLPS engagement as just site redevelopment plans that were not attached to a project, but we thought we would note them anyway. Please, next slide. And then since we first prepared this project, 2 new developments have been approved by LCRA but have not gone before the board. That is Baden School and 1128 Washington Avenue. So these will be going before the board soon. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are the requested summary statistics. And so what this chart is showing is, for example, in 2017, LCRA approved 66 developments or plans that didn't have a project attached to them, just site redevelopment areas. So that's they passed 66. The Board of Aldermen approved 66 of those, so 100% of those. And so far, since 2017, 39 of those have actually been, the incentive is activated, the project is complete. And I'll go into what happens to the ones that aren't activated yet, but have been approved by the board. So that's just showing between 2017 and 2023, the status of everything that was passed in those years. And as you can also see, the earlier years have more that have been activated. That's simply because there's been more time, of course, to construct and finish construction and activate the incentive. Next slide, please. So the chart on the left shows the status of projects that were approved by the Board of Aldermen, but were not activated. And so you can see that 46 of those were actually completed, but just did not receive the incentive. And that's generally because they did not meet minority and women-owned business participation goals. So then they did not receive their abatement, or they didn't pay fees or sign the contract. Something happened that held that up, but they were completed anyway. In purple is they're still under construction or planning, so they might receive the incentive at some point, but they can't until the project is actually finished. 14 of them are canceled or stalled, and then 18 of them are pre-approved redevelopment areas without a project attached to them, so we can't really say that the whole area will ever be completely activated since it's generally a larger area. On the right shows the projects are only 16 that were not approved by LCRA, but not approved by the board, right? And 8 of those were completed, 4 of those are still under construction or planning, 2 of those have canceled or been stalled, and 2 of them are pre-approved redevelopment areas. Next slide, please. And then EEZ and TIF are 2 other development boards that deal with tax abatement or tax increment financing. So we compiled the statistics for them as well. For EEZ, or Enhanced Enterprise Zone, we had 25 EEZ projects, 24 of which were approved by the Board of Aldermen, and 16 of those have completed construction and activated their incentive. And then we had 10 TIF projects, 9 of which were approved by the Board of Aldermen, 6 of which were completed and the incentive was activated. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, please proceed.
All righty, thank you for this very thorough presentation. I'm sure we have questions. Did anyone else okay, okay. All right, we'll start with Alderman Cone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am curious, just relative to the last slide that you showed with the project statuses, of the 16 projects that were approved by LCRA but not approved for abatement by the BOA, 8 of those were completed. Any insight into which 8 projects those would be? I'm just curious.
We can get you that list.
Yeah, we can get the list.
Okay. It's always interesting because, the litmus test for me for incentives has always been but for. So, you should be coming before this body, requesting incentives in the event that you're not likely to complete the project without the assistance of incentives. So, which is probably exactly why this board didn't approve those projects, because they had the capacity to be able to move forward, without the incentives. So, just kind of want to call out sometimes, the Board of Aldermen isn't always completely irrational or illogical with respect to these things. But, those 16, so am I understanding this correctly? So projects without abatement from 2017 to 2023, so there's 134 that received abatement that are not completed, and then there's 16 that were approved by LCRA but not approved by the board for abatement. And these are the statuses of them. So together, it's 150 projects total.
The 134, the abatement hasn't been activated yet.
Correct, but they've been approved by the Board of Aldermen. Right. So if they've been completed and the abatement hasn't been activated, will the abatement ever be activated?
It really depends on the minor compliance and compliance piece.
Can you talk to the microphone, Zach?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Zach Wilson, SLDC. There's many projects that are completed, but the abatement's not been activated yet because it hasn't been cleared by minority compliance and the prevailing wage compliance department. Madeline takes care of our incentives team compliance, like proposed jobs, the things that we mentioned, the community scorecard. Those are things Madeline will be tracking from here on out. But minority compliance and prevailing wage is a separate department. We need a letter from them saying that project's cleared before we activate the tax abatement. So that's kind of a holding pattern right there. So there are projects completed that could still receive abatement, but has not been cleared yet by that department.
So, and then the under construction, obviously, we wouldn't activate a tax abatement while construction's
Correct.
under.
Right.
The pre-approved redevelopment area, can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of?
There's certain areas in the city that's been developed, create a blighting area or redevelopment plan, large areas.
So these are the like area chapter 99s and
They just-
353s,
Dutchtown has one.
right?
Alderman Aldridge just passed one for his ward. Those are the ones like a single-family homeowner could actually apply very quickly
Right.
through us.
Okay. So these are applications that have come in directly through, entities that are in those areas. So,
Right,
but that includes all the 353s, so like SLU's 353.
SLU's 353 does not go through us. It goes through the Planning Commission. So there's only a handful of 353s in the
Right.
city, but we
I'm familiar.
We do not monitor them. So
Okay. So this is not representative of any of the 353.
Correct.
So Cortex, SLU, et cetera,
Right.
not represented in this 134
Yep.
total. So this is only the chapter 99.
yes,
Essentially. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Otherwise, as the primary sponsor of the original legislation that, required the development proposals and the report out to the committee, super excited to see this level of transparency coming before the Board of Aldermen with respect to our incentive programs. So, and love the additional, ordinances that have been added, supported them, and thank you all for your time and effort in putting this together.
thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Slicer.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, Ms. Ronstrom, for that presentation. I'll just start from the beginning and flip through on the development agreement training seminar. I do see that you have the trainings video posted online regarding, you said that's regarding the requirements and policies that govern redevelopment agreement. Are those policies also online for people to reference back in terms of what they're trained on?
Yeah, yes. It's legislation, it's state statute, so we cite the statute and
You
can,
just put basically
the code chapter.
code, okay.
which
And
you
if
could-
there's something that you all require that isn't from a ordinance or from the code, is that additionally available in writing on your policies there? Or how
we-
things work with your tracking?
Let's see,
I can't think of anything we've included that is not a state statute or
Okay.
ordinance passed by the city of St. Louis.
Okay, so what about policies on, when you do SIDS with a development? Sometimes we see projects that have a SID as well as a Chapter 99. Is that something that people are trained about, or is that policy? Because we have, some policies and how they might be formed. Do you have any other policies for when you look at them within a development agreement, anything like that?
We do ask for a list of sources, and hopefully when they have layers of public assistance like that, we reduce the abatement.
Mhm.
But since we don't oversee SIDS and SBDs and TDDs, there's not much enforcement we can do on that piece.
So that's not something that when someone comes forward to you and says, we're seeking an abatement, that is something that you work on them and advise them on, or no?
I do not. No.
Okay. You're on a lot of the boards.
Yes, sometimes I'm not aware of it to the
Okay.
last minute, so they don't ask me, to be honest with you. There's some weird caveat that some boards have to have a quasi-public official, and I fit that. It's not something I chose to do.
So you have some oversight more as an individual?
Yes, but I'm like one of
The
5
board
votes,
members.
6 votes, so it's not really,
That's interesting. They should ask you.
it'd be nice, yes.
Yeah, that's your time. That's your private time. Okay, interesting.
I'll also wanted to mention that.
Oh, yeah, please.
Alderman Aldridge is starting a special committee on special taxing districts, so I'll be attending those.
Okay, great.
Yes, of course. So any suggestions about, maybe educating the public, I think we, would be open to, of course.
Thank you very much. If you don't like oversee taxing districts in general, who do we look at as the enforcement of taxing districts? Is it just the Board of Aldermen because they report to us once a year? I mean, is that,
Well, the state ultimately
state?
has most of the power over them.
mhm,
There's different ways for each one to get approved.
right? But the state doesn't give you guidance, doesn't give
No.
us guidance. Okay. That makes it easy. Love that.
them for-
They just don't enforce anything. And then we don't necessarily. We don't do it. That's not, okay.
Stick or the T2.
I appreciate that. So moving on to development proposal reports. I appreciate that you mentioned the requirement to ask St. Louis Public Schools for their input and whether they support or oppose. I do know that in the ones that I've seen, it says that it was sent and I don't know that I've seen maybe one that they actually said that they support. It's been more often that they just don't oppose it. And
Well-
who is they when you say the St. Louis schools?
I've been sending to the president of the board, and there's a development committee they present projects to. So,
Okay.
yeah. So we send the packets to the school board, the development committee of the board, and they hear them. So
Okay. And then the superintendent as well?
I'm not aware of who's on that board. So
Oh, I just meant that you sent it to them.
I send to the sector, and they distribute to whoever's on the development committee.
Okay. Great. So in theory, hopefully everyone has it. Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
But we haven't received anything that people oppose it.
No, not as of
Okay.
right now.
That's good. Okay. So on the next slide, development proposal reports, there's one about St. Louis Public School engagement. You mentioned Fanning School and Baden. Is it the policy of SLDC or the practice rather, where you would be reaching out to the schools, to that development committee and saying, we're here to talk with you about this? Or is it just once they've approached you or once they approach them? Or how proactive are those conversations? Because there's a lot of school buildings that need to be turned to productive use.
Oh, very much so. We, to be honest, SLDC and I think most of our development boards, we're very supportive of any school that we look to be developed. Usually, to be honest, on our front, we would like to be proactive. We'd maybe do Chapter 99s for each school, vacant school, or possible vacant school in the future. But as right now, it's basically once a building has a buyer, that's when they usually come to us.
Okay. But the development committee, are you regularly in touch with them about are they aware that are they talking to buyers knowing that that's something that the city's SLDC is interested in?
Usually they find out before we do because
Okay.
the development committee votes on who they sell the building. So
Yeah, I just mean that proactive coordination in terms of, that you're all going to end up working on it, ideally together, moving on. So,
yeah.
okay. Moving on to development agreements, it was one that mentions numerous abatements hadn't been activated, some of which because of minority and women-owned business participation, workforce development, and prevailing wage compliance. I know a recent one that wasn't activated when became clear that it didn't seem that there was information that the contractor had adhered to prevailing wage standards. So that's something that I know are there people here who can answer questions about that? Because I know you said that's not you guys, or,
No, that's a separate department.
okay,
Minority Compliance Department.
okay. But that's been do you know how many that they haven't been approved because of failure to comply, where they still sought the abatement, but they didn't actually fulfill the law?
A good estimate number would be, is that 40?
So all 46 of them were likely because of those reasons,
Well, it's still hanging out there. They can still be activated
if they prove it.
yes, if they take care of what issues they are having.
Okay. Interesting. With the next bullet point, it says, following project completion, failure to maintain property up to code if not cured within 30 days. Is that something that the building division knows that? How does that communication work for you all to find out that they're not up to code and they have a violation? Or do you all follow that on, you could look at CSB and see if they've received it?
Correct.
Yeah.
This was recently added.
Okay.
A lot of our clawbacks have been added because of bad actors in the past. So this is new. Our attorneys have said we have to have given some type of period of time to correct the problems.
Yeah.
So moving forward, if we're aware of a problem owner, we can force this now.
Okay. Right. I'm just wondering who's checking, who is making sure you're aware of that, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It's an issue. It's a lot of checks and balances that we had to, maybe an SO or alderman, or it's hard to say moving forward.
Okay. But I would say if anyone becomes aware of that, they should say something.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Because we do on all new projects, we will get a compliance report from them, but
Right.
they will not be providing, we're a problem properties. That's something they will not be provided to us. So we would have, I guess we could reach out to the building division to maybe get a list of current issues going on.
Yeah, within the city Citizen Service Bureau request, there could be something, if you put in the address, the building will come up. It will say when you click on any code violations that are cited for, if a compliance letter has been sent. It would be a quick 30-second check to then know that more information is needed. You know what I mean? Because I'm sure there's something where you'd have to know legally they have the notice and they do get 30 days to make the repair, but where they can sometimes 30 or 60, sometimes there's extensions. So it's definitely possible to just check.
And we are a very small group. So
I understand.
that we kind of revamped the whole incentive.
I understand.
Madeline's our only compliance person, and Jake and Andrew are our financial and community kind of planning personnel. And we also have a great mapping person, James Jamba, who kind of provides more data to the public. If you go on our website, we have many maps providing more transparency also.
I appreciate that. And I think, one of the things that we all do in our jobs is when we have constituents calling us about code violations, or when we see them ourselves, we want to use whatever teeth the city has to get that person into compliance. So if we find, and this wouldn't be often true in my ward, but in other wards, if people find that they have an abatement that's been issued and awarded and they're not following code, they should know that teeth's available to make sure they're paying their full tax, full tax burden.
And just thinking of this on the fly,
Yeah, let's go.
the tax abatement map is online, showing every parcel that's receiving abatement currently.
Mm-hmm.
You could easily have a layer going over that seeing what problem properties, and that'd probably be the easiest, quickest way to find.
Yeah.
But the other issue, not all abatements have this clause in it, so that's where,
Sure, just moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're, I think, doing a lot of things to set up these fail-safes to make sure that there are good actors. Of course, we want people just to act, to do everything right without having to be but we're, okay. So those are my questions there. Yeah, I appreciate what you said about the revenue protection policy that indexes the tax abatement. I'm excited about that, making sure that there's never any money lost on a project, which I think point out. For the labor notification, I sent a note to some of the labor groups here to make sure they get you their emails. I made sure let's work together on that. You're welcome. To Dawes, great, proud supporter of that. Do you think there should be more projects under $1 million? I mean, because I feel like there's a lot of vacant houses in my ward, and my ward in certain areas has, under the map would qualify. And is it your opinion that we underuse that resource?
Very much so.
Okay.
I think a lot of it in the past, when the housing market was slow, that's when we saw the most applications.
Got it.
Since the market's strong, it's been strong for a while, that's why we saw kind of a drop. And also, we implement the map. We have nonprofits using it quite often, St. Joseph and those things in
Right.
larger Chapter 99 areas. So that's a plus, and a Habitat also does it. But no, we would be happy to receive more applications.
Okay. That's good to know. Okay. I think those were all of my questions. I'm sure my colleagues have more. Thank you so much for all of your time. I really appreciate it, and you are always so responsive, and I greatly appreciate it. I know you have a lot on your plates, so thank you for this presentation today.
Alderman Browning.
Thank you. So first question I have is, I want to differentiate between the but-for test and the scorecard. So one of those things, in my understanding, the scorecard is supposed to measure community benefits. And then the but-for test is to determine if the project can proceed without the abatement. Is that correct?
I'll let our scorecard twins come up now.
Andrew Knopp, SLDC. Yeah, so the community benefits scorecard is not really but-for test at all. It's obviously our own policy to try to say that we want some basic level of community value being offered by the project before we even get to the point of doing a but-for test. And Jake can obviously talk about the but-for piece, but essentially what we're trying to do is say with incentives, the project gets to a level that is of return and financial performance that is reasonable. And then if you didn't have the incentive, you'd fall below that, and essentially the choice for the developer would be that they wouldn't do the project, essentially.
So just thinking about how developments happen, understanding that people aren't coming with just a huge bucket of cash and being like, I can pay for this development all at once. They're usually getting financing, which is affected by things like the interest rates, things like construction costs, things like what we call soft costs, and then there's investors that have to raise capital from, which they would generally expect a certain kind of return. Otherwise, you can't attract investors. Like, I can't go out there and build a building and be like, hey, you want to give me, $10 million to build this building and I'll give you a 1% return. You can't really do that because you just won't get the investment. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, and before Jake answers, I'd like to point out this bar graph here. If you see the maroon or orange or whatever color the copy came out as, that just shows you how long projects take to be completed. We can approve a project in 1 year, and it takes 2 or 3 years for them to complete the project. Because like you said, they had to go out to the markets to find the right financing, what other lenders that would work with them on the terms. We are competing against other cities across the country. So money can move. We can't hold it within our borders, and that's the problem we have. So we have to market St. Louis as best as we can.
And not just the country, right? I mean, we're also competing with St. Charles. We're also competing with Illinois. Chesterfield,
Correct.
St. Louis
and-
County.
And they have hardly any requirements. That's the,
Sorry, can you say that again?
they hardly have any requirements on their incentives, so.
And meanwhile, we have the community benefits scorecard, which measures all the community benefits. In addition to that, we have prevailing wage. We have requirements to use MBE, WBE. I think I heard you say accessibility. And we have this additional requirement to keep it up to code during the abatement period. Am I missing anything?
We have clawbacks. You can't make a certain amount of profit off the project if you just decide within a certain amount of years. So that's another piece that a lot of times people flip properties within a few years, and that's a clawback we put in a few years ago.
So those are kind of community benefits in themselves as well. And I want to be clear, I'm hugely in favor of those, but you're saying that the other people, the other entities around us do not require those things.
Correct, yes.
That makes it tough to compete. So I appreciate that there's like measures like receipts for construction. Are you finding, I heard you mention CPI, and I was wondering how closely that ties with construction costs. So obviously you have the rising interest rates, which in itself can cause, inflation and other things. But I think within the construction world, you can also see shortages of certain things that might cause spikes in construction costs. So how closely do you think that, your measure for CPI is also capturing a rise in construction costs?
Good question.
That's interesting.
My name is Jake Narup. I do financial analysis for SLDC. So I would say that construction costs are increasing at a rate exponentially higher than inflation overall. Just within the last couple of years, we've seen construction costs go up 15%, basically, just between a project that comes to us in 2022 versus late 2023. So to your point, I think we try to capture that in the financial analysis. And when we're looking at returns, it's not quite as prescriptive as being the kind of pure but for. It's just about trying to capture what a reasonable return is, given to your point that there are other investment options available for these equity investors and other places for that money to go.
So when you apply the but-for test, it's really just capturing a moment in time, but those things are constantly shifting. I'm curious about these eight projects that got completed in the past. Since 2017 through 2023, 8 projects were completed, and we're kind of holding that up as we'll see. Sometimes they don't actually need the incentive, but did those projects use MBE, WBE contractors?
I can't speak on, there is projects that have backed away from abatements because of the requirements or the demands of maybe the neighborhood or those type of things. The incentive is the kind of the stick or the carrot, whichever way you're looking at it. So yeah, some of those projects did not participate or go forward because of things like that.
But how would one of those 8 proceed if the but-for test said they couldn't do it without the incentive, but then they did it without the incentive? How did they? I'm just asking. I mean, there's only 8
probably
of them.
lower labor costs, cheaper product, cut the type of maybe the type of units or the quality of the project. That's usually what happens.
So what I'm hearing is workers don't get paid as much. We don't use skilled labor. We don't use those firms that are minority or women owned. We don't pay prevailing wage. None of that is required. They might, but they probably won't if they're
Correct.
if they're trying to cheapen the product so they can still build it.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because I want to build quality housing in our city, right? Like I want to make sure that what we do build in our city is something that's going to last and contribute and not be a problem on day one. And it seems like a lot of the things we have built in when we use incentives help ensure that. But if we don't, we're kind of rolling the dice as far as what we are actually going to get in terms of a building.
Correct. Yes.
And I'm curious, how long does the process take just on our side from going through SLDC, LCRA, and then the BOA?
It really depends on when the application comes in. It could take all bells and whistles hit. We hit all the bells and whistles. Shortest probably 4 months, longest possibly a year, to be honest with you. So that's another major hurdle too, because pre-development costs are something that developers do not want to hold for very long.
So you mentioned pre-development costs, and I think that's a really interesting. So pre-development costs happen before they even really get to this whole process, or even before they break ground. Can you go into a little bit more what pre-development costs are and why, for instance, looking at this chart, why there's several things that may even get to the point where they get approved but never get built?
They possibly hire an architect to site plan or just kick the tires of what could be built there. Talk to neighborhood groups, hire engineers, do soil samples, those type of things. They'll hire a legal team to see what type of agreements they could possibly see, talk to banks, lenders, see what's financings out there, and all those people get paid during that time with no income coming in.
And so when you have a project like Fanning, which is stalled, those costs are just continuing to add up?
Yeah, the developer has to eat them until the project comes finished and someone rents the units. So yeah.
How does a smaller developer get that process? I mean, do they have the capacity to absorb that loss?
I think moving forward, we'll see probably huge projects move forward because there's larger companies and maybe a single-family household rehabber trying to do it. But I think the middle ground is where we might lose more of our developers for incentives.
I think that's something that I'd like to see explored about how we can make it easier to build more St. Louis size density because the big projects per zoning can really only happen in the central corridor. And that leaves, I think, some of my colleagues feeling a little sore about that, saying, why are we incentivizing big projects in the corridor when we're having difficulty building elsewhere in the city? But just to understand it, we're really trying to make costs work no matter, you referenced earlier that the market's strong, but I'm kind of curious what you mean by that, because if in St. Louis, the cost of building a building costs more than you can get in the rents that you charge or the return when you sell it, then I would not argue that the market is strong in St. Louis.
I'm talking about the housing market more so. I'm not talking about the development market, I would say. The housing market, you can almost still get top dollar for a house, but
for an existing house.
It's an existing house.
But to build a new house.
Oh, it's insane, yes. The cost. But it's a weird dynamic. I walk outside my house, I buy vacant buildings. So there's this weird, there's supply out there that hasn't been tapped yet. So, but that's a lot of that, especially in Southeast City, is not LRA related. It's private owners that are not here in the city. So if we got those on the market, I think it would help quite a bit, but there are a lot of people sitting on properties. So
that's a challenge, yeah.
And I think just kind of another point, as far as the housing market goes, when we're talking about the market being strong and seeing fewer of these single-family home abatements, I think even in neighborhoods where we'd like to see more abatements in the southeast side of the city on the north side, the incentive that we have available is not sufficient to make those market rate deals happen. So if it costs $300,000 to build a home, even with 10 or 15 or 20 years of tax abatement, you still can't sell that home for $300,000 in some of those markets. And some of the stronger neighborhoods don't have developable lots for new construction.
I wish you could say that again, but louder, because the incentives we have available are not sufficient to build housing in neighborhoods that have seen historic disinvestment. And we are not able to sufficiently offer something, even though every incentive that we have is almost available for some of these neighborhoods. And it's still not going to add up to a point where someone's going to build something market rate. And I'm going to pivot here. Community engagement. Oftentimes when you're building something in a community, you want to build something that people in that community as well. just curious, what have you heard from people in North City about what they want? Whenever this community engagement done, what have you heard that they want built up there?
Most I hear is single-family housing.
Market rate?
Owner-occupied, yeah, mostly, yeah.
And what I'm hearing is that it is not possible to build anything like that
We
with
have
the
a,
incentives we have
we have a
available.
lending problem more so than anything else in Southeast City and North City. We don't have the lenders to make those loans.
And I wouldn't say that it's impossible. It's just that it's going to require significant subsidy. And that's just dollars. That's not tax abatement. That's just equity dollars. So it's possible. It's expensive. But if it's a priority, we can do it. We just have to allocate the resources to do that. And tax abatement's not going to get us there by itself.
Yeah, I'd like to point out, a lot of people think tax abatement is we're giving a chunk of cash out to somebody. We do not. We save money in the long term for the developer, and they build that into their loan. So we're not this department does not hand out cash, and never will. So I just want to make that clear.
Well, and I think that's an important distinction is that it's built into the financing deal that they're looking for. So when they're going to a lender and they're saying, hey, I want to build this, can I get this loan to do it? They're going to look at, and if anyone's bought a house, you know this, they look at all your income, they look at, you know, your assets, and they see kind of what can you afford. And the tax abatement kind of slips in there as, well, we also have this bonus that makes this more financeable.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. I'm going to swing back to Fanning School because I'm fascinated by this. So yes, it did not get the YTech credits that they applied for. Are they applying again, to your knowledge?
I don't want to speak on it. I think they have to go back to the school board for the option too, so that's still in a holding pattern. So if they do get the option, I think they would go back for the LIHTC.
But you mentioned that there's some opposition in a breakaway group that's trying to stop the development.
Yeah, there's a small group around the school. It's affordable housing, so that's the.
And I regret asking this, but how small?
It could be 6, it could be 20. I spoke to the neighbor group, a neighborhood meeting, but I couldn't tell you how many are against it or for it. So, but we did receive many letters of support for the project also. So that's another part of the problem. We don't officially know which neighborhood groups to listen to, and that's kind of so that's where we kind of just add everything in the packet moving forward. So you guys have all the information at your fingertips.
And I would think, and that's why I'm asking, right? Because I was going to ask, how much credence do you give to, you know, different groups? And it kind of sounds like you just kind of put them all, and then you let us decide.
Yes, it's sometimes we don't hear about pushback until it comes to the board. So that's another problem. So there's no. We have our LCRA. It's not a very well, it's a public meeting, but a lot of people don't know about it. I guess we could do more promotion on that, but it's pretty damn boring. So no one would freely go watch it if they wanted to. So there's ways we could do possibly more outreach or better outreach, but the issue is to know who is the key players in each neighborhood is something we don't know on a daily basis.
And it's difficult, I think, to do community engagement well. And not every neighborhood is set up to do good community engagement. Not every neighborhood has the kind of engagement within that neighborhood to just be able to hold a meeting and have people come to it. So all these things kind of depend from neighborhood to neighborhood, right?
Correct. And then a lot of times 15, 20 years ago, I used to work for a small CEC in South City that did development and home repair and a lot of good things, senior Meals on Wheels. You also often see toxic personality kind of erode away the neighborhood group too. So you don't fully know what's going on in that inner circle until later on. So that's another problem we have. We're taking those letters of support as face value. We're trusting that neighborhood group. Can I stand up here and say that neighborhood group is correct or strong enough? I'm going by what they are telling me, so.
And so again, just slightly switching tracks here. Looking at this chart where we have the project summary statistics, I'm curious if you've heard. What I see here is a sharp decline. It occurs right around when the pandemic hit, but it hasn't really picked up. Are you hearing from MBE and WBE firms that the decline in abatements is hurting their ability to stay viable?
Yeah, yes, there's groups of contractors and unions also, they rely on these projects to move forward. So no, we would like an uptick. I don't think we'll ever do 66 again, but in the high 20s or low 30s would be nice. Because as you see, many projects get approved, but not all of them get completed. So you want to approve a nice size because now all of them will be finished.
Sure. And I can think of a project right now in my ward that this board voted, I guess, 2 years ago before I took office, but the Albion project at
Correct.
Wendell and Kings Highway, which is still a parking lot. So that incentive has not been activated, I assume.
Correct.
And yet, when it was approved, I think the interest rates were
Very low.
very low, historically low.
Mhm.
But then they got very high. Construction costs, as you said, are astronomical. And it's just continuing to be an empty parking lot that's not giving any taxes to the city, or much taxes, I should say.
Correct. And I'd like to point out, once the board bill is passed by this board, no incentive is activated until the project's completed and cleared all minority compliance and prevailing wages and any other requirements. So I think many people in the public think once this board passes something, an incentive is activated. That is totally false.
That's helpful. And if it's passed, if it's breaking ground and it's actually under construction, what are the efforts there to ensure that prevailing wage is being paid?
That is a little, I probably shouldn't speak on this totally, but there's new software has been implemented to create a better system, and that new system is getting flushed out. There's been a couple catches that recently I've been aware of, but they're correcting the software to improve that compliance in the future. But no, that's something we're very eager to monitor. Same with minority compliance. A lot of those projects you see that are completed but don't have the abatement activated, a lot of those are waiting for final lien waivers to make sure every contractor is paid. Those are the things that department is doing to make sure everything's correct. So.
And then if you don't, for instance, if you lie about like your compliance with WBE, MBEs, you might get a call from Al Goldsmith.
Yes.
It's a joke for everybody. It's the U.S. Attorney's Office.
It'll take years, but yes, you will get that. Yes, Paul. Yes.
I want to make sure we're enforcing these things and making sure that we are, because these benefits are there. And as you said, other municipalities don't require them, but we do. And so if we are having projects go through this and we want to make sure that they're good projects, they're well-built projects, they're employing the people that we need to be and having employed, and that they're being paid what they deserve, all that is very important because we're already kind of, I'm guessing, taking a little bit of a loss just by having the requirements in the first place. So if we're not attracting development because we have these extra requirements, but then we don't enforce them properly, that would be a shame.
No, correct. And just to point out, like, Creve Coeur just passed an insane amount of tax abatement for the Monsanto campus or whatever, Bear, whatever it is, something like 20 years for abatement in Creve Coeur. Chesterfield has done something similar to their old mall. Those are the things that we're competing against. And we need incentives to activate projects in North City and North Southeast City. Those vacant lots, those vacant buildings, those need layers of funding and sources and incentives to get those moving. And I completely agree that neighborhood groups need to have a voice. We just need to hopefully be all on one page as we move these projects through. So.
And if a project goes through the process with SLDC to see what kind of abatement it qualifies for, you do the but-for tests, you score it on the scorecard, it advances to the LCRA. What triggers it to take that next step to go to the LCRA?
A lot of people don't like that our LCRA board votes majority of our projects through. I want a productive, healthy project going from LCRA and make sure everyone's supportive for the project. I do not like to have dirty laundry in public meetings, so I like to make sure everything's clear, everyone's supportive of the project before we go to LCRA. So that's something
When you say everyone, you mean everyone on the LCRA board?
If we hopefully everything is flushed out more so. School board, neighborhood groups, everyone's there's no whispers of they're against this project. So
I'm curious about where the politics enters this equation, because obviously once we get to the board, we're going to have our own beliefs and we're going to have our own thoughts. But what you're doing is it's a quantity type analysis, like right. It's quantity and quality, right? So you're looking at both what's going into the project and knowing that if it uses incentives, it's going to be higher quality.
correct. Yes.
But also quantity, you're measuring what are the taxes we're going to get from this. Does it need the abatement to happen? Does this make sense for the city to offer this, or would this happen without it?
Correct. No, we want the project to be a win for the school district and win for the city's coffers also. That's why we no longer give 100% abatements. The school district immediately gets an infusion of cash or cash moving forward. City does also. No, we're very, we have to make sure that we support the project.
And so there shouldn't be any politics entering it before it gets to really the Board of Aldermen, right?
Yes, we rely on this board and the greater board. You as elected officials know your neighborhoods better than I do, and my staff. So we rely on you to understand what's moving forward. So yeah, you kind of are what we rely on to move the board building to the next level.
When you say, us as alder people that we understand and represent our neighborhoods, it hints at a little bit of a thing that existed before we passed the most recent reform around this, which was this idea of aldermanic courtesy, which was this idea that the alderperson knows their area, and if they're requesting the abatement, you should just, pass it on through because that person knows what they're asking for. Obviously, we got into a little bit of trouble there, and there was the appropriate action taken, and people went to jail for it. But my question is, this new system and the way that we go about it, is that meant to kind of curtail that potential corruption through aldermanic courtesy by applying all these tests before it even gets to the board?
We hope so. The packet, all information we provide online, the meetings that are public online, recorded online, all those things are hopefully bring light to what a lot of things have done, not in the dark, but behind where the public can't get access to. So we're trying to be as upfront with the public as we can be. So,
yeah, that's certainly what I believe in as well, is making sure that requests are, open, that we understand what we're asking of the developer and being clear about that, and not doing negotiations behind closed doors that would be leading and opening that door to corruption. So I appreciate the efforts that have been taken in the last couple of years. I think that this is going relatively well. I can't help but notice that the number of tax abatements that actually get to the board now has dropped a lot. And so is it safe to assume that the ones that are getting to the board, they've been through all those tests, they've gotten the but-for test, they've gotten the scorecard, and they've qualified on the scorecard, and they have qualified under every other test. So by the time they get to the board, what are we considering?
Hopefully, the ones once the board sees are very quality projects moving forward and healthy projects, and win for the school district and win for the city. So we've cut a lot of fat out. These are projects that are needed in areas that need investment. I think we have one hopefully in the next week or two, probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks before this committee, a project in downtown, and then we have another one hopefully in Baden. So those are 2 areas that need investment. So no, you'll see higher quality projects moving forward.
Okay, well, I appreciate you taking my questions today and for this really nice presentation. I also want to say thank you for the reports that you issue us with each of the tax abatements that come before our board. It's really helpful to break down the costs and see the gain to the city, the gain to the school districts, all those numbers that really help prove that it is a good project for the city and that we're not just throwing abatements out there for people who don't need it.
Correct. And another issue I want to point out before in the next few years we'll have several hundred properties coming off abatement. I don't think we'll probably put out a report hopefully shortly, shows that how many abatements are coming off the rolls, and we're putting very few abatements, activating very few abatements. So the collector revenue should be happy moving forward. So.
I'm really excited to see that, because I think one of the criticisms we often hear is that we used to hand out abatements like candy, and that was to the detriment of everybody in St. Louis. But when we see, and when we're able to measure things over long periods of time, we might be able to see exactly what the perhaps rehab or the new construction of something and how it paid off over that period of time and how it adds to our books. And I think looking at that kind of empirical evidence really helps make the case for incentives that we use going forward.
Yeah, and if you look at the houses in but Botanical Heights they call it now, once they come off the rolls, those are $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 houses. We would never do a full abatement on those, but those homes will be paying full taxes, and that'll be a major win to the city. So.
Yeah, I can think of several neighborhoods which have made
Shaw,
stunning turnarounds.
South,
Gaslight Square.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, thank you for being here today, and thank you for the good answers.
Thank you, Alderman Browning, for your questions. I'm going to be able to pull a lot of clips from that, because some of those answers will directly respond to some of the questions that my constituents had. I also want to note that your question gave him the ability to reflect on all of the work. Thank you all for all of the work that you all do on projects prior to them getting here, right? And knowing that those SLDC board meetings, those LCRA board meetings, all of those are aired on STL TV. So again, to his point about the transparency, I thank you for that commitment to that as well. Listen, that neighborhood organization official title, I think that's something that we all deal with day to day in from the smallest things to speed humps, again, to development projects. So that's something that I think we need to look at as a body as well, so that we can properly advocate for our communities. Because again, some people can't come together and claim the title as a neighborhood organization and really be in a position to sabotage and cause division and disrupt a really good projects at times. So thank you again for bringing that up. And I think I had one more thing, but I can't think of it right now. It'll come back to me. So I'll go ahead with questions. Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you, SLDC team, for being here. I do want to echo, like you say, that neighborhood organization is and that's going to be, I guess, my question about community engagement is interesting because you have some neighborhoods like in North St. Louis that may not even have, associations. And then you have associations that exist where it's, thank God that they are involved, but maybe it's the loudest 9 or 15 people on the block when, you have Miss Deborah who don't have access to get to the association meetings, but, have lived there. So, I mean, I commend you guys for trying your best to figure out the community engagement part. But if you can dive like a little bit deeper into that, and thank you for the presentation that you presented earlier. I was watching on YouTube and rushing over here from across the street and got here in enough time to ask questions. Could you just dive more into that community engagement process, and when do you get that engagement before you're making your decision? Is that during the LCRA meeting, or is that when it comes to SLDC? When does it start, and how do SLDC go about really engaging with the community?
Before, like, a lot of these changes have been made like midstream of some of these projects. So we had to tell the developer to reach out to the neighborhood to get support. But now, when I get calls, I'd say, go talk to the neighborhood group now. I do as soon as, even before I get an application. If people call, have questions about incentives, I say, you have to talk to neighborhood groups. So that flag has gone up, that you had to get involved as soon as possible versus midstream, So that's a big change. It's a positive change, I think, because they can also, like you said, the developer kind of feels, oh, this neighborhood group is this way and this neighborhood group is that way, and is this a stable neighborhood group? They kind of can feel it out sooner than later. So no, we encourage neighborhood group engagement as soon as possible now.
And I do appreciate a lot of the changes that under this administration has incorporated in how to do development. It may be a hindrance to us because counterparts in the region don't do that, but I think us being using kind of I'll use a Ferguson Commission term, our equitable lenses, in hoping that if we take this risks now and not do what I think the old board has done, or previous leadership, I would say, handing out a lot of tax abatements, but being very strategic on it, we'll be able to bring a different type of growth and development to the community. So I know you guys aren't and thank you guys for trying to get the community voices part of the process, but so SLDC doesn't do that. You guys rely on the developer to have that part of their packet.
We have a new department, community engagement department. We're still rolling that out, trying to feel out exactly how to engage the community and the best way to do that.
And how new is that community engagement department?
I'm not over it, so
Okay.
It'll be like 6 months, 8 months. I can't speak for it, to be honest, exact timeline. But no,
And is it set up, or you guys are working to set it up?
it's established.
Okay.
I think it's a team of 7 right now. So no, we rely on them to kind of give us a heads up on, and we also introduce them to the neighborhood managers so they can introduce them to the neighborhood groups, the developers. So there is some type of soft handoff to engage that.
Got it. Eventually, I'll get to the scorecard, but the community engagement isn't part of the scorecard, correct?
Not the scorecard, but we do need it for the packet that is presented to this board.
And to echo, the packet that SLDC presents to the board is very helpful. I know we have a lot of questions about you guys today, but that packet that you provide is something I know that we all look at, to not have the time to worry about other people's wards, and even sometimes in our ward to go through all that different information. So it is a very good, I'm glad that there is a scorecard that is now in function within the department. Next with SLPS. So just to make sure, is it because forget a little bit from the board bill that Alderman Cone passed. Is that a requirement or is it just recommended to have that part of the packet?
I believe it's a requirement, but I'll let Matt.
Yes, it's required for any project over $1 million. Yeah.
And all the projects over $1 million, just to be clear, because I know sometimes when I think there's also this notion out there about like tax abatements are taken away from public schools, and I know a lot of reports that you guys provide actually show how tax abatements not only add to public schools, but especially when they come off the road, they really generate, because if you have a building that is not, I'll take Alderwoman Key's ward that we just passed, a building that is not operating, it's not really collecting any taxes, by providing that abatement to give that facelift will actually eventually bring funds back to SLPS. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. And that's why the school board has generally not, has maybe even supported many of these developments, but they haven't taken a stance either way. But they've told us that they are very in support of bringing development to the city, bringing residents, so that the enrollment also could increase, but also in terms of the tax benefit. It's all that tax.
Yeah, like stated before, that since we no longer give 100% abatements, we give anywhere from 50 to 90% abatements. The taxing districts receive immediate increase in revenue.
Gotcha. And then to the labor, also very glad that that is in the previous legislation. Is that a requirement or is that a suggested thing that it's in there?
I believe it's a requirement, but
Yes, that one is a requirement. I think it's for projects over $1 million as well.
Okay. And I appreciate you, I think it was maybe Alderwoman Clark Hubbard legislation that identify when there's a project over $1 million that labor groups are added, and I really appreciate her leadership for ensuring that there's representation, because we also know that a huge supporter of labor, but labor, we're still working to make sure that labor looks like what America really looks like and not what it used to look like. So glad to see, MOCAN, CBTU, NAACP, and I tip my hat off to you guys because there's a lot of, when you think about what the development may be, I know like when we had the Midas Hotel and you think about, you also now have to think about the employees inside, which that is not part of the development of the building. So it's a lot of nuance that we are experiencing being a very labor-friendly board, but as a development agency, I know that can get a little bit maybe outside the scope. We're still trying to make sure that we are building buildings with individuals who are going to provide quality work for the workers that are doing the work.
correct. We're trying to, with our scorecards, try to show the biggest impact for the city we can have, showing just not financial, but the community scorecard, how that project will improve the community and what wins will the community get out of that. Can all the things we present, can they get better? Yes, but we're here to work with this board to get it better, and we're open to that. So, yeah, we didn't expect this to be perfect, but we're working on it as we go.
Gotcha. And appreciate you guys for continuing to be flexible, even though the board, for the record, do not have like direct power over SLDC. You guys always that quasi type of own entity, but when it is legislation such as Alderman Cone or Alderwoman Clark Hubbard or Alderwoman Sonia Tada legislation to make sure people's taxes are being paid up to date, I do appreciate the willingness to work with alders who are the ones who are directly, as I always say, the boots on the ground in the community. So thank you for that. So now I want to get a little bit into the scorecard. I noticed, and could you explain for like the general public what the scorecard is? Was it something that always existed? And why did SLDC decide to create a scorecard for development?
I started at SLDC about 10 years ago. There was a rough scorecard, physical scorecard that was presented to the board. That was kind of new within the last 10 years, which, to be honest, we were ahead of a lot of other municipalities through the country. When we reached out to Baker Tilly to kind of revamp our system here in the last 3 years, we came up with a community scorecard and refined our financial scorecard. So to be honest, cities call us, question us, we sit down with them. They are very intrigued by our scorecards. They think it's very cutting edge. But the thing is, we would like to test it more and move it, refine it to move forward. But I would like to Andrew and Jake to come up and kind of do those two scorecards a little bit more depth.
The scorecard twins.
Yeah, the two scorecard guys. Yeah, so I'm obviously community benefits scorecard, and I might comment a little bit on what Jake does because, as Zach is kind of alluding to, not really that many even major cities, and especially not smaller municipalities, do the type of financial rigor that we do on our tax abatement projects, and that's, on a simple, to simplify it, is related to the but-for test. But we've now got something new, which came out of, a lot of our criticism and the perception of us doing things kind of behind closed doors and not explicitly making the community a part of our processes. So now we have a community benefits scorecard that achieves a couple things and obviously puts, macro level community benefiting types of development practices in place, and also lets the community engage themselves and, provide things like affordable housing and transit access, et cetera. But it also makes it more transparent for developers what they're supposed to be getting into when they try to come to us for to get tax incentives. It should make it a little bit more clear for them rather than each project kind of being negotiated on a case by case basis. So we think those are good things. I don't know if we know of other examples of cities that really do what we're doing. So.
And so at a high level for our financial scorecard, we're basically just trying to make a reasonable estimate of all the new taxes that would be generated by a project being developed. The biggest part of that is usually property taxes, but we're also capturing payroll and earnings taxes on new jobs, retail sales taxes on retail components. And then as a secondary check on that, we're basically building an operating pro forma for the development and then checking that developer return at year 10.
So I'm sure I know the answer to this, but you guys are glad that this scorecard is now, would you say it's a beneficial thing from the past to now having this score for in the city of St. Louis?
So I think the public and the board and the commissioners that sit on our board are more aware of what the project is and how it's an asset to the city and the taxing districts moving forward. And we've cut back on incentives quite a bit on projects that actually need it versus using it a lot often on maybe possible projects that didn't need it in the past. So this is kind of gets everything above board. So.
Yeah. And then I noticed within the scorecard, there are some points that are higher than others. It looked like the most highest one that you can get is affordable housing. Then the second highest is geographic. And then within that geographic, it's depending on which EGI, you can get more points for people who are like at home. EGI is the Economic Justice Index, I would assume. So EGI 1 and 2, which EGI 1 you get 30 points for, 2 you get 20, are more areas that have probably been disinvested in to make sure that there is a not an equal balance, but more of an equitable playing field.
Correct. You'll see Southeast City and North City be the key, where those points are the highest for those two areas.
And then when you guys made affordable housing 50 points, is that, what was the idea behind making that a kind of the grand whopper of?
We had many focus groups while we were doing the scorecards. Affordable housing was a key topic that came up over and over again. Affordability. I think there's certain areas that needs affordable housing and the other areas need market rate housing, but there is definitely need for affordable housing in good chunks of the cities.
Yeah. And I do think there's always that good balance to have. I know there was the conversation of what have you heard in North St. Louis, and people want affordable housing is, I mean, not affordable, market rate, which is true. I think sometimes we saturate too much affordable housing in certain areas, and we pioneer and say, yeah, we want affordable housing, but then it's like affordable housing not in my ward, but when we saturate it in one area, that creates problems. So more market rate is always good, but
Correct. Correct. A mix is perfect, I would say. We don't want an overabundance of affordable housing in one area, and we don't want an overabundance of market rate in one area also. So there is a perfect balance there, and that's what we're trying to strive for.
okay. I think that's all on that. Besides, I think the third one, public infrastructure improvement. I know my public infrastructure friends on the committee love to see that's number 3 with a high whopping points in transit access. And then lastly, since there was a plug for it, I'm happy we talked about the how SLDC guys really don't have input when it comes to SIDS, special taxing districts, and stuff like that. That is more regulated from the state, which I know there was a report that was done by Nicole Galloway that said do better because a lot are not in compliance, but that is not at SLDC. That is kind of more who they report that to, which is not you all, correct?
Correct, yeah. They hinted that a body should oversee them, but if that body has no power over them, there's not much enforcement that can be done. So that's the key there.
Right, so we'll explore this more in the special committee next week, right? But I did want to say they do have to turn in a report to the city, but I believe it's to the clerk. So it's not SLDC, but
Yeah. So they actually supposed to turn it into a document to the board,
to the city.
to the
yes,
city
the
clerk. Yeah. Okay.
clerk. But if that's not being enforced, they might not actually be turning in that report.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Well, soft plug. Look forward to talking about those special taxing districts next week, October the 9th, from 12 to 2 p.m. right here in this room. And I think we'll have a representative from SLDC. So I really appreciate you guys being part of it, because I think it's interesting. Some of those SIDS and taxing districts, you guys compile some information on, as well as like the state compile information. I think the collector revenue has some, so it's not in a spot to know how many are out there and where they are, if they expired or anything like that, correct?
Correct. And we are working with our GIS analyst, James Jamba, and I are working with Christine Ingracia and the president of the board's office to get that data. But like you said, it's not in a centralized place. So it is a challenge, but we're getting closer.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Alderman Aldridge. I remembered what I wanted to speak to was Mr. Wilson, your comment about toxic erosion, and when we were talking about neighborhoods and knowing that we have to deal with that again firsthand as older persons. And sometimes the loudest is just in the room to create the most confusion. So being able to navigate that is going to be key. And I did want to also ask if someone, or either representation or even the entire department, that community engagement department, could come and present to us so that we can have that captured here in Hudson. No time soon, whenever it's available. I wanted to make sure I made that request and speak to also Alderman Aldridge's and the comments that were made about affordable housing, because I know I believe in mixed use as well, but I also have a heart for affordable housing. I know that's different terms. I mean, you talk about that all the time, how people spend that, and the saturation. And I don't know that that's even a word, but also the elitism that comes from people that don't think they should have affordable housing in their communities, which is really sad, because really it's more of a management issue and not affordable housing, right? I know I have a great affordable housing development in the 10th Ward that I'm very proud of. I use it as an example all the time. And again, it's a management issue.
Right.
So being penalized people that have good projects are penalized by bad actors and bad past practices is just not fair, not just in affordable housing, but everything. So thank you for bringing up those points, Alderman Aldridge, about affordable housing and the saturation. But again, I wanted to make sure we note that that's really more so a management issue and not a space and not a need, definitely not a need issue. Okay, Vice Chair Sanya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Mr. Wilson. You know me, I'm going to start off with my gratitude. I really appreciate, and I think the report that you're giving today, the work that Alderman Cone did on Board Bill 64. As someone who came in after everything that happened, I think that the processes that you all set up, it made it so much easier for me to have conversations when they come to my community. And I think that it's very good that there's a standard process for these things and that it's not all just up to the alder, because it allows me to point, whether that's constituents or developer asking, I know that I can point them in you all's direction and that's the starting phase. And I think that just helps, again, keep everything processed, keep everything uniform. And I do think it shields from personal biases, from personal relationships weighing into the process. And it also just allows everybody to understand what is the expectation front. And then if a community is, in support or in opposition, or if I'm in support or opposition, I can point directly to things that are referenced on a scorecard. But I just want to commend you all and all of SLDC and the administration for, the clear work that you all have done to really put us on a new path, to be willing to have new conversations. One of the articles that I really like is actually a piece that Alderman Browning wrote that talked about the need to vet developers, and this was written many, many years ago before any of us were serving. But I think if you were to look at that article and then look at some of the things that you all have done, I think some of the things that you have done really do address a lot of the concerns and put processes in place. So just thank you all for all of your work and the things that do happen before us. I'm a fan of them. I know a lot of times people think elected officials should get all of the decisions, but I think it's going to be up to us to make decisions. But I think it is okay to have a uniform screening process so that when we make decisions, everybody was held to the same standard. I do have some questions, and I almost feel bad because you've had so many questions today, but many of them won't be redundant, just a little bit more detail on a few things that haven't been touched yet. Is this report online?
We did share with the clerk, but there is one small edit we would like to update, and we'll share it with the clerk again. So,
okay.
And we could put it online on our website too.
Okay, excellent. I'd just like to make sure that we make this available so that any members of the public that may want to, may have wanted to send us testimony or can comment, that they're able to see the same things that we are seeing and we are reviewing so that they can weigh in.
Okay.
And then I also just wanted to maybe give a little correction. I feel very strongly about community benefits agreements, and I do appreciate the work that you all do, but none of those things are community benefits agreements. Some of the things that Alderman Browning mentioned, because community benefits agreements are from the community. When we do things, they may be public benefits agreements, and I don't even know if you want to call it that, but I just think that's really important, because community benefits agreements are supposed to come from the community. If they even come from others, that's a public benefit agreement, but it's not a community benefits agreement. And I think that also, while it may be tough for us to compete, I think that we need to be more competitive, because unlike St. Charles, unlike Ladue, unlike these other places, our largest landowners are tax exempt entities, and obviously taxes are what keep the city going. So I do think we should have, rigor and have additional things, and maybe even be a model for what other municipalities should be considering when they're giving out tax dollars. I had just a general question for you. Mm-hmm. Is there, just based off of the time that you've been practicing the legislation, that you've been doing a scorecard and all these different processes, are there any recommendations that you would like the Board of Aldermen to look at or update, or is there any changes that you think need to be made, or suggestions, anything along those lines?
I think we've made a lot of changes in a small amount of time. I think it'd be great to kind of let it breathe for a little bit and get the whole community get used to it and know the system before we're making more changes. So I think that's the biggest key, because that's something I get questions from the public and developers and a little bit everybody. What's the system like now? So I think we've made huge strides, and that we should be proud of the work we've done, this board, and then the changes that we've done at SLDC. So no, that's something I think we should look to for a while. Just let it breathe and see how this works for the next year or two. So.
Are you having any conversations or have you been involved in any conversations about a community benefits agreement portion of the legislation?
I have not been aware of anything like that yet, but we'd be open to it. We came up with a title. That title could change easily for the scorecard, but there is a piece in there that scores additional points if there's agreements made within the community. So there is the carve out for that.
Excellent. And so one of the things that has caught my eye that I've feel like I've experienced since being here is sometimes there have been projects that have come to us and then, like kind of in the media or a constituent will raise like things that are on their public record, or I guess projects that are in place that a developer may have that may be a indication of how they may perform in the future, but that is not anywhere a part of our process. I don't want to name any specific developers or entities, but there's been cases where things were approved, they were moving forward, we were in discussion, and then we found out that there were some other things, other projects that they had were not going, and we don't have anything in the scorecard. I'm not sure how that would work, but that would just be a flag that I would like to raise, and I think for me, it's something that my constituents mention to me often that maybe something that is missing somewhere in there is we don't look at how people have performed in the past is a good indication of what they would do in the future. So if they are not, honoring the MBWE requirements, if they are not up to date on certain things that they're supposed to pay, if they're, if they just had other issues, I just think if there's a window, even financing, just there might be a window or a place to put in, and we don't even have to do it formally. I know you guys as boards and commissions have a lot of your own processes that you do before it gets to us, but maybe just build in somewhere into that so that we can.
Oh, no, that's a great point. With the TADA is a huge piece that helps out quite a bit. We have new software that we can do searches now for all city-owned land, see what they come back on, if they're current on their taxes and all other things that has helped out quite a bit in the last 6 to 8 months. So we've made strides in that piece also, and we could spell that out more in the packets moving forward.
And how has your implementation of TADA been? Obviously I was a sponsor, so I'm just very curious, how has that been for you in practice?
It was, a lot of this stuff is getting connected with the right people. Collective Revenue has been very helpful working with them. They've created a form. I hand that form to the developer. And it's been running pretty smoothly. There's been a couple of hiccups, not on the Collective Revenue, but just understanding what EIE, what numbers to provide to the collective revenue. So no, everything's moving very smoothly, and it's been very productive. So.
Excellent. I've heard good things from Mr. Daly as well. He said he's really enjoyed y'all's engagement, that you all have been very responsive, and he's enjoyed kind of the increased collaboration. So I'm glad to hear that on your end as well. I am curious about the school board piece. I was on the Board of Education before I was here. Do you all I feel like some of what I've heard is confusion on what reaching out to the school board means, or, what that looks like. So in terms of the legislation, it's looked at as the Board of Education, because sometimes we've received emails and they've been from the Parent Action Council, but I don't think that they're necessarily the formal representatives of the district. So when you all think of engagement on legislation as far as weigh in and weighing out, you're specifically mentioning whether or not the Board of Education as a body has decided to make a statement, not necessarily any of the many. And I do appreciate the Parent Action Council, but any of those groups, I just think that clarification is helpful.
Correct. We read it as the school board or school district contacting them. We did not see as other groups associated with the school district. So we notified the school board of what, before this year, we reached out to the school district, and we received no response. And finally, we have, beginning of this year, have been reaching out to the school board and the development committee, and we've been sending those same developed packets that you receive, they receive, so they can see fully what they're looking at.
Thank you. And then the only other thing, which you can send to me later, just a link where I can access the public seminar. appreciate the information that was available, but I'm happy to just start sending that to people because often I have to send people to you all and tell them, as you know, I CC you on a lot of those emails.
Yes.
Hey, this is your starting point, but now I'd love to include the link to the webinar so that they can kind of, get abreast as to what the conversation might be like with you before they engage
No,
with you.
we'd be happy to send that link and the link to the maps and everything else, and our videos. Don't worry, we're not in them. But it's just training videos of what abatements are, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, I did have a request for another comment from Alderman Aldridge, and then we'll wrap if somebody else has any comments, follow-up comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep it quick. It was something that the shimmery alderwoman from the 7th Ward brought up when it comes to community benefits. I think that is something, definitely important. But I want to give y'all flowers because I know y'all have done that with that redevelopment blight bill, talking about benefits for the community, for them to tap into a tax abatement, which I don't think that has ever, from like a resident standpoint, been done. And that was because the community said, no, SLDC listened to me, and they had like 7 requirement, 8, 10, it was like 10 like ask, and it was not one of those acts that you guys did not deny the residents over in the 14th and 11th Ward. So I think more of that is always healthy, and just glad that you guys are continuing to adapt.
Yes, and no, we're very excited about that redevelopment plan, and we hopefully can work with future neighborhood groups to do similar projects or similar plans in other areas of the city for that, so.
Anyone else have any follow-up comments? No? Okay. Did you guys have any closing remarks? Okay. Well, thank you again for this presentation, for taking the time today. And for any follow-up questions, I guess I did want to say, because I'm always like this when people are watching, if there are any follow-ups that people watching or constituents may have, where can they contact you or reach out to you all?
Wilson Z at -m.gov or 314-657-3773.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All righty. Any written testimony, Madam Clerk?
We have none.
Okay. Any announcements, colleagues? Nobody wants to invite anybody to their neighborhood's National Night Out events tonight?
Well, since the alderwoman
Right.
threw it out there, we will be having, also check the city website. You can see all the wonderful National Night Out that is happening. But if anybody want to join the 14th Ward, I'm going to start at Washington at 1300 Washington Street, roughly around 5 o'clock. And then we're going to head to St. Louis Place to watch the original Wiz from St. Louis Place Neighborhood Association. So come to the mighty 14th. And I may come to the Power of 10.
Oh, yeah, in the 10th Ward, we have 3, Gwen Giles Park, Frank Williamson Senior Park, and Fountain Park, and I'm sure there's some others too. As you said, you can check the website. All right.
Okay, I have 8 neighborhoods. I think so many of them are having one, so I don't want to name specifics in case I leave one out. But if you are watching this and you send me an email, I will happily send you a link where you can go all of the national night outs. And there's 7 neighborhoods, but there's 8 neighborhood organizations. So just in case anyone's watching and you're curious about where to go, if there's something in your neighborhood, happy to send you all an email with that information.
Yeah, that's good. There's direct correlation between National Night Out and what we talked about today, because if you're looking for an event and a space to have community engagement, that's a very well organized one this evening. So all members were present this morning at this afternoon now. At this point, I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Yeah. Moved by Alderman Combs, seconded by Alderman Browning. At the request for previous row, we are all good. We are not hearing any objections. Everyone have a blessed day.